Hey everyone, CW Music Reviews here. I'm CWD and this is going to be a music review of the new Of Montreal album, Innocence Reaches. Of Montreal is the longtime Georgia band represent, fronted by Mr. Kevin Barnes. They've been around for maybe a decade, at least over a decade at this point. They've left quite an impression on the world of indie music with a series of records that they have prolifically produced over the years. But I think with this decade that they have entered, starting with an album like Lousy with Sylvia and Briar, they've definitely left quite an impression on people that maybe weren't fans of their work previously. And they've got a really eclectic sound. They've experimented with pop rock, progressive rock, PB&B, glam rock, garage rock, noise rock, EDM, house, alternative country. It's actually kind of vast how much experimentation they've done, and it was definitely something that leaves me interested in Montreal, even if I haven't been that crazy about every single album that they put out. Especially with their previous album, Aria Gloom, which sounded just like a lot of indulgence in terms of sound and lyricism. Pretty much with that entire album, each individual song had kind of a Frankenstein monster vibe to it. Like one moment it'll be a garage rock song, next moment it'll be a psych pop song. It was just really wild and kind of dizzying how much experimentation did go into that album. However, with this new album, Innocence Reaches, they've kind of done the same thing again, but they've taken the indulgent behavior of that previous album and they've pretty much upped at the ante a lot. I'm gonna be for real with you. I've recommended a lot of albums since starting the channel, and a good chunk of them I really do feel like that people are going to listen to at the moment and say, yeah, this is cool, but this thing, oh man. I don't expect very many people to love this album. Matter of fact, I don't expect a lot of people to even remotely like it, but this is gonna be one of those times where an album just sounds so intriguing, so intricate, and so just out there that I can't help but feel but love it. This thing is easily one of my favorite albums of the year. This album's about 12 tracks in length, about 50 or so minutes long. So it's a good length, but not so lengthy that it's going to drive your patience. There's definitely kind of an accessibility to the eccentric execution that they have done with this thing. Essentially, Of Montreal have kind of returned to their more dance-driven and electronic roots that they kind of put on the back burner ever since the late 2000s or early 2010s. Take the opening track, for example, Let's Relate. Really strong and really upfront synth groove on this cut that I like a lot. I like the thick bass sound that's dense and particularly interesting all over this cut. There's a lot of walls of synth on this thing that did seem incredibly overbearing at first listen, but after so many listens to this thing, I can't help but love it. And Kevin has a lot of effects thrown onto his vocals that add to a really strong digital nature to what it is he's trying to talk about. At first, when you listen to this thing, it just sounds like, of course, Kevin's trying to get with this person. It sounds like that he thinks that this individual is really cool and really attractive and wants to be with that person. But when you really read into the language and really take into consideration the digital atmosphere that the track goes for, you can definitely tell that this thing isn't so much about trying to get with someone, but more so trying to assimilate an individual, really kind of kill their individuality in a way. As he's not saying, hey, let's get to know each other better, let's relate. Let's find similarities between each other so that way you don't seem as alien to me as you did previously. Or at least that's my interpretation of it. There's a lot of interpretations that could go into a good chunk of the lyrics on this album, as well as like a Montreal albums in the past as well. I mean, should. If there's one profound individual in the world of indie music right now, it's Kevin Barnes. There's moments on this thing lyrically where he is not profound in just outright language, but just in the less is more type vibe in terms of lyricism. Like the track A Sport and a Pastime, which is one of my favorite tracks on the record, and I thought it was going to be my least favorite at first, given how just gutted the EDM instrumental is. But when I listen to the lyrics, and when I take into consideration the instrumentals, this is easily one of, if not the smartest song on the record. Again, it's got kind of a generic-ish EDM vibe to it. It's got kind of a really soft moment before it goes into a groove-driven break that is kind of typical of EDM, but listening to his lyrics, it sounds like it's the sister song to the opening track. Not so much this song trying to relate to another individual to seem less alien, but more so trying to assimilate himself with this individual, pretty much lose all of his sense of identity and just submit. This song is about submission, and I would actually argue this song is actually about selling out. Pretty much him over this semi-commercial kind of beat, singing kind of ironically about wanting to submit and trying to be a part of this thing. I don't want to be mine anymore, I want to be yours. I want to lose my ego. He's really submitting quite a bit here. Then there's also the track It's Different for Girls, which seems to be a song for the ladies. He's pretty much saying that, yeah, women are pretty much oppressed in this male-dominated society, but they're still kind of fucked up, man. While simultaneously they're taking a lesser man's shit, and they don't piss on the seed, they don't really poison the game in order to compete. While some of them are kind of demonic, they're all pretty much gods. And the fact that they go crazy and they like to fuse chaos and mayhem, it doesn't really define who they are. It's a particularly weird track. I do like the new wave-ish vibe that this track as a whole goes for. It's definitely an intriguing track instrumentally. And there's a lot of that here, a lot of really vast and intriguing tracks that are in that instrumental vein. Like the track Gratuitous, which has this hard-hitting guitar and bass syncopation that I enjoy a lot, and kind of a borderline doo-wop chorus. Gratuitous, abysses, gratuitous. And then there's the track Chaos Arpeggiating, which is easily one of my favorite song titles of the year. Hands down, no question. And of course it has this really arpeggiated acoustic guitar lick that comes up, as well as some really downright swaggerish electric guitar that comes in. There's definitely quite a bit of build to this track that I enjoy a lot. It's just a really dramatic track, and I just enjoy the shit out of it. There's also some tracks that kind of indulge in kind of a borderline jam kind of vibe, like the track Les Chants de Maldoror, which has a really driving and upbeat groove to it, before it kind of just drifts off into this guitar solo that really drives out. And then that cuts out, and then there's like a more driving acoustic guitar and some vocals that I like a lot. It's just really intricate, this track, as well as the track Pacts. It has really a hard-hitting groove to it, and he seems to be really critical of an individual that he admires a lot. Pretty much saying that, yeah, saying that the world would be better off without you is pretty much true of everybody, or at least people like you and I. And all of a sudden there's like these bridges that go into this really psychedelic acoustic guitar thing that sounds kind of like the Beatles in a way, before it just hops right back into this groove. Oh man, there's just so much intricacy to a good chunk of these tracks that I can't ignore for the life of me. The track Trashed Exes, which has like these really borderline abrasive and hard-hitting electronic beats that really just drive home the off-kilterness and herky-jerkiness of what the track is trying to go for. God, this should have been reworked to sound really climactic and made into the closing track. Pretty much overall, I don't really find anything like subjectively or at times subjectively wrong with a good chunk of these tracks. I will say that the track Ambassador Bridge might have been not fleshed out enough. And the closing track, Chat Pilot, I'm kind of torn by. I like how it starts off so off-kilter. I do like the mid-paced and kind of driving synth wall that's on this cut, but it just doesn't really close the album out as well as it could. It kind of just goes on for the 6 minutes it goes for and just ends in kind of a fade out. As well as the track My Fair Lady, which is probably the only track here that kind of has a disjointed message in a way. Kind of about, he mentions this woman that has been physically abused or emotionally abused in some way, and now that she has been this damaged, he has to find some way to give love to another individual or something. I don't know. It's a weird track that I'm still having difficulty figuring out. But other than that, this thing is awesome. Or at least I think so. I think a lot of people are going to be really put off by this album. I completely understand if after watching this review you go out and try this thing and you're like, wait, this thing is garbage, I've been trolled. I completely get it, but I legitimately think this thing is a really good album. It shows a lot of experimentation to what Of Montreal has done in the past, and I sincerely hope continue to do. If anything, I think the band is slowly but surely getting weirder and descending into some kind of instrumental madness. And if this is like the precursor to that, color me intrigued. If you're into Of Montreal at this point, there's no reason you shouldn't check this out. You'll definitely like it quite a bit, maybe a little more than me, maybe a little less than me. If you're into this alternative sound, if you're into like dance music, glam rock, new wave, all that stuff, if you're pretty much into pretty much weird and intricate music as a whole, definitely give this a try. I think Of Montreal had a moment to finally seize me as a fan, and they've pretty much succeeded. Aurillac Gloom pretty much failed to translate as much as it should have. Again, I don't expect a lot of people to love this thing. I might be the only one, but given that these reviews are mostly subjective anyway, and given that these reviews have been based around my personal enjoyment of these records, and the fact that Of Montreal have pretty much given me something that is this good to my ears, I'm not mad at it. I'm actually pretty impressed. This album is a plus 2.5 out of plus 3. Like I've been saying over and over, I understand if you hate this thing. I completely get it. But this is just one of those times where I enjoy a record quite a bit, but at the same time I won't try to like be as defensive as I would with other records. But if you've given this album a listen, what'd you think of it? Did you like this album? Did you dislike this album? What was your reasoning for that, and what should I consider listening to and reviewing next? CW Music Reviews here, signing off.